Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode of Tales from the Territories Recap and Reminiscing Show. Here is your host, Ronald Ray.
Hello, ma'ams and sirs. I am Ronald Ray, your boy with a cornbread accent. Today I'll be covering Vice's episode of Tales from the Territories, talk about the AWA, and I'll also do my own reminiscing about the AWA as well. At the time I started watching wrestling, the AWA was starting to decline some. I think it was the beginning of the decline. But it was still considered part of the Big Three. If you look at the magazines, they would have the Big Three, the NWA, WWF, and AWA. Red Martel was the AWA World Champion at the time, but he would shortly lose it to Stan Hansen. And quickly, due to some unhappiness about Stan Hansen going to Japan, the title was awarded to Nick Bockwinkel. The Mighty Road Warriors were the tag team champions for a little more than a year, but then when I started watching, they dropped it to Jimmy Garvin and Steven Regal, who would then go on to drop the titles to a young Scott Hall and Kurt Heenan. Your ladies champion at the time was Sherri Martel. They had a lightweight, junior heavyweight championship as well. If you can tell by the entrance picture, I had somebody X'd out. Not going to explain why. Look at the picture. Look at who is one of the AWA lightweight heavyweight champions who could have been in that picture. Read the story and you know why I cut that piece of shit out. They did a quick mention about the beginning, and of course, like other promotions, they focus more on pro wrestling being more of an athletic contest than the showbiz part. But it was started in 1960 when the Minneapolis promotion, owned by Vern Gagne and Wally Carbo, was seceded out of the NWA territory system. They felt Vern Gagne could have been world champion. They thought he could draw as much or possibly more than the champion at the time, Pat O'Connor. But politics didn't favor Vern Gagne and Wally Carbo, so they decided to pull out and expand in the Midwest. On the roundtable in this episode, we have Medusa Michelli, who went on to become just Medusa, then Alundra Blaze in WWF /WWE. Then back to just plain Medusa when she came back to WCW. Diamond Dallas Page, Ken Patera, Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, and Greg Gagne. Briefly on Jim Brunzell, if you get a chance, go back and look at some of his stuff. He was pretty decent, but one thing that really did stand out, he's got to be on the list of like one of the best people to throw a drop kick. I mean, his drop kick was also a thing of beauty, just like Okada and Bob Holly, Brian Pillman, of course Brad Armstrong probably had the best, but Jumpin' Jim threw a pretty mean drop kick himself. Medusa would have a little fun with Greg Gagne, talking about how getting into business for him was easy since he was Vern's son. But he stated he had to drive the ring truck and do some refereeing, so he made it sound like he had to pay his dues as well, like everybody else did. And Medusa herself, I think she was doing the independence at the time, then was asked to come over. The other three guys, Diamond Dallas Page say he sent in a tape with him and his Diamond Dolls and two other guys and cut a promo. The other two guys, Patera and Brunzell, had athletic backgrounds and got trained by Vern Gagne. And oh yeah, in case you didn't know, Vern Gagne was also known for training. He trained probably like a who's who in the wrestling business. As mentioned, previously, Ken Patera was a power lifter, got picked up and trained by Vern Gagne, as well as Jim Brunzell, who played football. He had also trained Gene and Ole Anderson, the Iron Sheik, Ricky Steamboat, and of course, I had to put that old picture up there of uh, Ric Flair before he came all Nature Boy like. I think Ric Flair was more of a power lifter too at the time, so that would explain why he's a little bulky there. But yeah, Vern Gagne broke a lot of people in. Now, from all the shooting reviews I've watched and books where they talked about Mad Dog Vachon, it seems like he was a crazy guy and just a wild character, plus a legit tough guy. And this story about the plane they called Suicide One sounds like the original Plane Ride from Hell, but a one-man show. So I don't blame one of those guys one bit if they, did tie him up and he's sitting there all mad, and they decide to leave and let the pilot, deal with it, unhook him. But this is a situation that would have played out a whole lot differently today. I'm sure him being kind of, locally, and all those wrestlers being almost like local celebrities or, somewhat famous anyway in the region, played a part in Vachon being released in the other guy's custody. Because today, cops with the body cams and everything, they would have definitely probably sold that to TMZ, and if he didn't get shot, for trying to fight him, of course, he would have wound up spending a whole lot of years in prison as well. But Vachon would, after he left the AWA around 1986, he had a cup of coffee in the WWF, then retired. And in 1987, he was hit by a car while jogging, resulting in him losing one of his legs. And I remember, I think the last time I seen him was one of the In Your House pay-per-views. I think it was one called Good Friends, Better Enemies. And Shawn Michaels and Diesel, Kevin Nash, had one of those, I think it was just a no disqualification, anything goes type match. And they were, Vachon was out in the crowd, and Diesel pull his prosthetic leg off, but they would fight a little bit, and Shawn Michaels would get a hold of it and wind up hitting Kevin Nash with it. And Mad Dog, being the Mad Dog, didn't seem like he minded too much. But he would wind up passing away, I think, in 2013, I think. Can't remember now. Anyway, but yeah, he was a wild man. Now, I didn't know this about Medusa, but she was trained by Eddie Sharkey, who also trained the Road Warriors, Barry Darsow, I think John Nord and Scott Norton. Basically, any one of his bouncers who bounced in his bar that was big and wanted to get into it, he'd train. But the Sherri Martel Medusa program was very short lived. I can't even think of any matches off the top of my head that stood out or any promos. But I do remember Sherri Martel, she was managing Kevin Kelly and Gene Kiniski at the time she decided to go to the WWF. And they did an arm wrestling angle on TV between Kevin Kelly and Tommy Rich. Well, Sherri got involved, and Tommy, let's just say, kind of embarrassed her on TV, and that was the excuse they gave for Sherri leaving. And shortly after that, Medusa will replace her as Kevin Kelly and Nick Kiniski's manager. And of course, they both would be Hall of Famers going to great careers, and the WWE. I mean, Sherri became a mainstay in the WWF. Beat Magnificent Moolah for the WWF Women's Championship. Then went on become a manager. Of course, sensational Queen Sherri, Scary Sherri, managed Shawn Michaels for a long time. Then went to WCW and managed Harlem Heat. Uh, but yeah, this is a funny story too. I mean, it almost reminds me of a few car rides I had with my friends when I was in high school, but we're not going to discuss those. Not today. Yep. And of course, Bobby Heenan's time in the AWA was long over with by the time I started watching wrestling. But still, it's no denying that, he was the best manager or one of the best managers ever. He was always entertaining, was quick witted, and just funny as heck a lot of the time. I mean, like I said, I see him mostly in the WWF. But the little bit of footage I did see of him in AWA and in Georgia Championship Wrestling was the same. Quick witted, thought his didn't stink, and basically he was the brain. He was smarter than everybody, better than everybody. And managing wise, there's no denying that that was true. Wow, surprised this didn't end up as one of the Dark Side of the Ring episodes. Anyway, like I said, the Memphis episode, man, wrestlers was tough back then. I mean, he denies throwing a boulder through the road or through the drive-through window. And they kind of like add them on too, like some little kid threw that boulder, and it wasn't a big power lifter like you who, if you would think about it, was it you or the kid? I would pick him. The line where he said, "Now, cops are pretty good guys, except for maybe a couple of them." But anyway, I just remember him, Ken Patera, when he came back to the WWF after his prison sentence, and then feuded with the Heenan family. After that stint was over with, he would go back to AWA in 1989 to win the tag team titles with Brad Renegades, and they call themselves the Olympians. Now, of course, the story I've always heard was Vince tried to buy all the territories, including Verne Gagne. Now, I've always kind of heard that Verne Gagne was not keen to selling the territory or the company, to Vince McMahon. He seemed to kind of balk at it and want to kind of keep his company. But I know definitely Vince would wind up buying a lot of their TV times on the stations they were in. The Hogan story they told was the same one they've always told, but I always heard on, like Hogan's behalf that, he didn't show up out of frustration of not winning the world title, even though he was becoming a big draw at the time. I mean, you think somebody won't put Hogan on top would be crazy, but supposedly Verne didn't because he didn't think he had the wrestling skills. So they always had a couple like dusty finishes where it made it look like he did win, but he turned on TV, then he didn't win. Another rumor at the time, or I don't know if at the time, but another rumor I heard was Verne Gagne offered $100,000 to the Iron Sheik to break Hogan's leg, but then Vince McMahon offered him $100,000 not to break Hogan's leg. Not true. Not sure how true that story is. But yeah, let's see, going in '83, a lot of guys left. Hogan, Gene Okerlund, Ken Patera, David Schultz, Bobby Heenan, uh, just a lot of names just left at the time and went to work for Vince. But this is a time where a lot of the territories were suffering the same thing. Was the warpath of Vince McMahon, gobbling up all the talent and with promises of big money and bigger exposure, which pretty much is what happened. Heck, he bought. I don't know if it's going to be one of the Tales of the Territories or maybe a future Dark Side of the Ring. Vince McMahon bought Georgia Championship Wrestling time slot, the WTBS time slot. But anyway, maybe one day I would love to talk about that. I would love to know more about that as much as I read, because I guess I'm a Georgia boy. I guess that's the reason I want to talk more about it. But anyway, that's pretty much what happened with the Hulk Hogan and Vern Gagne, and this was really it peaked and declined. They still were able to have a pretty good '84, I think, because they still had some fans like kind of hung on, but yeah, it started declining a little bit. Now, like I said, in '85 for me, it really looked like it was declining, even though they had talent there and young up and coming talent like Kurt Hennig, Scott Hall, Leon White, and of course one of my favorite tag teams, the Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Mark Jannetty. But soon, Kurt Hennig went to the WWF, became Perfect. Leon White traveled the world as Big Van Vader. Scott Hall would go around the territories too, Florida, Memphis, I think a cup of coffee in WCW. Then I think left, went to Puerto Rico some, and came back as the Diamond Stud. Then, of course, blossomed in the WWF as Razor Ramon. Before coming back to WCW as part of NWO, and kept his real name, but kind of kept the Razor Ramon gimmick. Of course, Mark Jannetty didn't really do much, unfortunately. Even though he was talented, but I think just bad habits and bad luck kind of caught up to Mark Jannetty, and of course Shawn Michaels became the Heartbreak Kid, Mr. WrestleMania, the icon, the showstopper. Now during this time too, they tried to co-promote with Bill Watts, Jim Crockett, Fritz Von Erich, Don Owens, amongst others, on a little venture called Pro Wrestling USA. They had a big event called Super Clash, which was Super Clash 1. And from what I was reading, the event was pretty successful, and it seemed like to be on the right track, but egos and accusations of other people trying to steal Vern's. I think he tried to blame David Crockett and trying to steal some of Vern's talent, and I'm pretty sure they all kind of was. If that was going on, I'm pretty sure there was a mixture of everybody trying to steal a little bit of everybody's talent. But it wound up not doing anything after that once the egos and all got in the way. Even for me personally, the AWA wasn't really one of my favorites. Despite having a young talent, like I mentioned before, it just seemed dated to me. The whole, at the Las Vegas Showboat tapings, the ring out. I forgot what the ring announcer's name was. He want to talk like this live here at the Showboat Arena, or I can't do it now. That seemed dated, and even though those guys could still go and hang with those guys, with the younger guys. Nick Bockwinkel and Larry Zbyszko were a little long in the tooth. They would eventually put the world title on Kurt Heenan, giving him a run. But unfortunately, he didn't seem to have any kind of credible babyface opponents because they turned him heel, had Larry Zbyszko hit Bockwinkel, then they wound up retiring Nick Bockwinkel. So that made Kurt Hennig the heel, but they ain't had no real baby faces built up. I think they was trying with Greg Gagne as possible champion, but I think even Vern seeing that, hey, the fans weren't buying it. Even Greg Gagne, his style and bland look, and not so much good of a promo guy either. Greg Gagne wouldn't have been able to carry the company. But I think him and Jim Brunzell as the high flyers, they got over. But like I said, that was definitely before I started watching it. But they wound up, have Kurt Angle or Kurt. Keep saying Kurt Angle. Kurt Hennig. Hopefully, I didn't say Kurt Angle in every recording. Anyway, Kurt Hennig, he dropped it to Jerry Lawler before going to the WWE and becoming Perfect, Mr. Perfect, excuse me. And which I was happy about. I was a Jerry Lawler fan, and the Memphis TV just really, really built it up so good, But then after that, it kept declining some more. They was trying to co-promote again. But before I get to that other co-promoting venture, I want to give them credit where credit's due. As a kid, I thought they had a better wrestling figures than the WWF did. WWF figures was the big, heavy, rubber, bulky ones, no real movement. And at least, AWF figures had, movable parts. And I just thought they were, because they had Ric Flair figure. As you see there, Carlos Colon and Abdullah the Butcher, the Road Warriors, Freebirds, Fabulous Ones, Nick Bockwinkel, Stan Hansen, Jerry Blackwell. They had all those guys, but I think they had a Hulk Hogan figure too. I guess the whole copyright thing didn't affect them at the time, and making toys at least. But I always liked their figures more than I did the WWF's. Anyway, before I rambled on about the figures, I did mention they tried to do the co-promoting thing again, this time with Jerry Jarrett and the CWA Memphis territory, which it was already a developmental territory to begin with. So they all try to partner up with the Von Erichs. And this all resulted into poorly reviewed pay-per-view called Super Clash 3. I'm pretty sure if you go watch the documentary, the WWF documentary on the AWA, it'll kind of give you more of a detail, but supposedly some people didn't get paid and they're like, screw it. And I think Lawler said he went on Memphis TV basically and said, as a safe face towards everybody, I guess, because they were still trying to have an agreement. Because he wound up winning this match with Kerry Von Erich, which made him the AWA champion and the world class champion. Then they went up giving him another belt called the Unified title. So basically, in his interview, his promo, he said, "Look, carrying 3 belts is kind of is a task." So he sent the AWA belt back to Vern and whatnot, and sent the world class belt back to Texas, and said, "Hey, y'all figure out who y'all's new champions are, and I'll go around defending against the unified title against them. And but then he said, oh, something happened, and the AWA balked at it, blah blah blah. But anyway, I think everybody kind of pulled away again, from Vern again, and it'll just go from worse there. I mean, after that, they did have like a battle royal to determine the new AWA champion, and it wound up being Larry Zbyszko, and I think Larry Zbyszko, I guess, dropped it once to Mr. Saito, and then won it back against him, and I think he was the last champion. But like I said, it just went from bad to worse. They would have still have some young up and comers coming in, like a Scott Norton and Kokino, who would grow up to become Yokozuna. But I didn't really see much of them. The AWA scene in that period was like a best of type show hosted by Eric Bischoff and Greg Gagne, which would feature old matches with Nick Bockwinkel, Jerry Blackwell, and of course Hulk Hogan. And of course, in my mind, even at that age, I was like, okay, this promotion is done. Anyway, so that's my recap and personal reminiscing memories of the AWA. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, subscribe, like, and share. Leave a comment as well, leaving your memories of the AWA, and I'll comment back. No problem. Maybe some things would, jar my memory a little bit better. Anyways, you guys take it easy, and I'll catch y'all later.
We here at RP Tube Vision would like to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.